Welcome to the Autoimmune Campfire.
Join us, coaches Helen and Nona, for honest, heartfelt conversations around living well with a chronic condition.
Come sit at our campfire. There's a chair waiting for you. Hello, Helen.
Hello, Nona.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good. All the better for seeing you.
Oh my gosh. Thank you. And I just want to say welcome to our listeners as well. Thank you. We are so excited. Episode 9. Here we are. Do you want to say what did you do this weekend? How are things?
I had a lovely, spacious weekend with some socializing and some spaciousness. But as we're going to talk in a future episode coming up, I had a little bump in the road health-wise. So I've just been a little bit sort of weighing that. And so it's been, just had a few hard days. But that is something that I'm kind of used to, but it doesn't necessarily make it easy. I don't know if that makes sense. But Nona, tell me, how are you arriving today? How was your weekend?
Well, I didn't want to gloss over that because I think that is a normal experience, right? For those of us who have autoimmune disorders. So I'm just sending you big hugs from here. And I'm glad we're here together to record this episode. Yeah, my weekend was great. I went up to Fort Collins with Eric and we went to visit my daughter, and we went to a live climbing competition at her local gym. And it was so much fun. I've not been to a live climbing competition, and there were people from the Colorado World Cup, and there were some Olympians who,
Ooh.
yeah, we had a couple of Olympians who were there, and it was so much fun. And they had the best DJ, and it was just they had food trucks, and it was packed. I mean, it was like standing room only. There were probably 500 people there, and the crowd was super jazzed up, and it was just so fun. It was so much fun, and so we're already planning on going next year because it was so good. And today we had our first snow. And so, yeah, I know we had our first snow this morning. And so it was my first sauna of the winter season as well. So it's just starting out to be a good week. Plus, I'm here with you.
Oh, thanks, Nona.
Yay!
Yay.
Yeah.
So welcome to episode 9. And we titled this Moving Our Bodies. Exercise is not a 4-letter word. Except that movement. So we're talking really about movement today. How do we take care of our bodies for optimal health? And what I think is super fascinating is with an autoimmune condition, exercise can be a double-edged sword. And what we know is our bodies love to move and they function better when we move. So we thought we'd have a conversation about this and see what happens. And we really would love to hear from you in the comments about what movements light you up or help you in this journey. So, but Nona, talk to us a little bit about, because you said this was one of the things that when you were diagnosed was one of the biggest things they said to you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So my neurologist, like the only thing he said to me, like that was lifestyle related, was like, just keep exercising. And then I've heard other neurologists say, I might pronounce his name wrong, Dr. Boster, that may not be how you pronounce his name. Yeah. Anyway, so I have heard him say on a number of occasions, because he has a YouTube channel and podcast, and he has his own MS center somewhere in the Midwest. And he says that exercise is like a DMT. So, disease modifying therapy is the high efficacy drugs that are used to prevent new lesions for MS. And so I mean, it's like it used to be that MS patients were told not to exercise, and now they're told under no circuit, like move, move, move as much as you can, as much as you can. Um, and that can be tricksy, especially when you have an autoimmune condition and you're fatigued and potentially injuring yourself when you do it. And all the cultural stuff around the marriage between exercise and weight loss. It becomes, and I think too, like, even with autoimmune disorders and being told you're supposed to exercise, it becomes transactional, right? Like, if you move your body, then this is gonna happen. But I would like to challenge that idea that it is transactional. Like, I don't move anymore because of weight loss. I move because I feel better, I feel mentally clear, I sleep better. Like, there are so many good, like, and it feels good, right? It feels good in the moment directly after I have a better day when I exercise. So, I mean, those are my initial thoughts about exercise. I'd love to hear from you too, especially on the heels of having some bad days. Having this conversation, I think is fascinating because I think we could maybe dig into that a little bit too. Like, what does that look like for you in the ups and downs?
When you are having some of the ups and downs, then you just, everybody is different. And when with autoimmune conditions, sometimes your body does change. And so you need to sort of really pay attention. So for me, because my hands and feet are flaring, my usual practice is yoga, but a lot of stuff on my hands is painful. So I'm adapting that. I've been doing shorter walks instead of longer walks so that I don't hurt my feet so much. So, I mean, I think there's just more adaptation that comes in. But I think one of the things that I think can be somewhat overwhelming when you think about exercise is, all right, well, you've got to get, you got to do some cardio, right? Because especially with rheumatoid arthritis, sometimes that can come with some cardiovascular issues. So it's like, okay, you got to get your cardio in, get your heart rate up. You got to do some strength training, right? Because you want to have mobility and flexibility, right? And so there are all these different pieces that you need to do and balance. Oh gosh, work on your balance. And then it's like overwhelming at times. And certainly when I get busy, and certainly some of the clients who I work with, when they get busy, the first thing that falls off is exercise and sleep. So they eat into their evening, but then they forget to exercise or something. And when we exercise, there's enough research to tell us now that it decreases our perception of pain, it decreases our fatigue. It's really critically important.
Mhm.
And how do we plan in and honor all of those different pieces we're supposed to be doing with our bodies?
I think that's really true. I think that it becomes overwhelming when we're like, you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to do this. But it's like there are ways to do strength training that also hit your cardio. Like, and those things in and of themselves can also be used for balance. And, like, I don't think it has to be 4 separate things. I think there are ways to bring it all together, because the stronger you are, the better balance you're gonna have. Like, a lot of strength training stuff requires balance. So I don't think you need to be thinking about it like it's 4 different things. And I know I don't wanna get into a prescriptive thing here because I think that's just not the point. But I also just wanna point out, like, I get that it can be overwhelming, but I also think that there's a way to streamline it, and starting with what you really love is, I think, the best. So I wanna go back to, so I grew up with a mom who was really, really, focused on exercise as a way to manage her weight. And so for me, exercise was really mostly a weight loss tool, and I didn't really enjoy it. I tried to be a runner. I don't like running, but I tried. I did my best. And I finally had to come to a point that I stopped exercising entirely so I could reset why I exercise, why I move my body. Um, and that was one of the most helpful things I ever did, and getting into it, I was like, "What do I enjoy?" So if you're, like, not an exerciser, not someone who moves a whole lot, and you're like, "Oh, I have to do strength, I have to do cardio, I have to do balance, I have to do mobility," it's like, "Oh my god," like, don't, don't do that to yourself. Like, what do you enjoy? Or what do you think you would enjoy? Or what did you enjoy when you were a child? Right? Like, I think thinking and then start there and see what happens.
Growing up, I consider myself more of a mathlete than an athlete, and so that was really important in my family of origin that, your brain was well developed and you were achieving from an academic perspective. And it was really only, I mean, and I remember going hiking with our family and we were sort of marching up and down hills and I remember hating it. And and then when I went to college, I went hiking with friends and started rock climbing and loved it, and it was so fun. So when you were telling me about the rock climbing earlier, oh my goodness, I would have loved to be in that audience. It's very, very cool. So, yes, and I started playing squash with, my best friend, who's still my best friend, and she's an amazing squash player, and I was terrible, but it was so fun. So there were various different things, and then there's that link to, I'm of the age where there was the Jane Fonda videos, aerobics videos, and the, oh gosh, step aerobics, and I used to do step aerobics till my knees swelled, and I'm like, and this was before I had RA, and I remember thinking, "I really hate this," so I stopped. But I kept going for a while because I thought it was, in inverted commas, good for me, even though I was actually injuring myself.
Yeah, and I think that that is often the case for people, like, that they well, the other thing I'll say is not only do they go and do things they don't like because they think they should, they also maybe do it for longer than they need to because they think they should. It's like when we were talking about something else, and I was like, when people are like, "If I can't do it for an hour, I'm not gonna do it at all." I'm like, "Oh my god." Like, that is like the death of creating a really nourishing practice for yourself, I think. Even 10 minutes of exercise, of movement is gonna be fantastic for you. As you know, we've had conversations. I'm exceptional at injuring myself. I'm so good at it.
Me too.
Yes, and so I have learned over the last year to really listen when I'm moving instead of just getting completely drawn into the adrenaline of something or what my mind thinks I should be able to do. I really listen to what is happening in my body today. And I know, like, as you're dealing with a flare and you are doing that, right? As you're moving your body too, you are really paying attention to what is happening in your body and only moving in a range and in a way that supports you.
Yes, I definitely think doing therapeutic yoga with you has been a huge benefit there because I think that often I would go right up to the pain. And in therapeutic yoga, you have that metaphor of the traffic lights. Like, don't go to the red, but like, are you noticing the yellows?
Right.
And the fact that even though it's less than I think I, in inverted commas, should be doing, I can do
Mhm.
more when I listen to my body, which sort of speaks to the piece that I was thinking about is it's really about relearning your body with an autoimmune condition. I mean, I went from being really active
Mm,
to being, you know, very temporarily, but in a wheelchair. And that loss of movement and all that came with that
mhm,
really impacted my mental health because moving really helps my well-being, my mental health. I feel much less anxious. I feel more energized. I love being out in nature. And it's as if all of that disappeared because
mm.
I couldn't sort of move. And then getting the movement back was such an incredible gift.
Listen, everyone needs a co conspirator to reimagine their lives and uncover the opportunities in the challenges they face. If you are looking for the place where hope meets possibility and you are ready to create a life of meaning despite the diagnosis, look no further. Helen is a certified professional coach with a background in medical research and an autoimmune diagnosis who brings compassion, empathy, and your best interests to every conversation. Learn more about coaching with Helen at helensampsonmullen.com.
So there are things that I love to do, and I love to do those. But then noticing, being a woman of a certain age and having bone scans and noticing that my bone mass is decreasing, it's like, okay, strength training. And I have never been a person who's enjoyed a gym or strength training. Can I just tell you that? No. So it's been one of those things where I've tried various different programs and really hurt myself, like really hurt myself. Thought, oh, I could do 10 of these. I did 10 of those. That was so easy. Let me do 10 more. And then been laid out for a week. So what I want to say is this has been a really humbling experiment in relearning how to best use and be with my body. So now I work with the myofascial release PT who is designing programs specifically for me. And they look a lot different than the ones I was accessing. Like, oh, that makes sense. I want to do this. Then let me look at that. And that wasn't right for me. And even though she's designed them specifically for me, I'll do them and then something will tweak. And then she'll say, okay, let's do this. There's a different way to do this. And so it is definitely a privilege to have access to that. But what I would say is it's helping me relearn because I'm all gusto. Okay, well, if I've got to do this and I don't really want to do it, I'll just do it. I'll just push through it. The white knuckle thing and it's not helpful because you got to be in your body.
I love that. And so, the other thing that I think you're really speaking to in this, when you said, I was really active in a particular way, and then you were in a wheelchair, and then you all had to like relearn your body. One, I would say well, for me, there's a day to day quality to that. Like, I think I just want to make sure that we say that it's not like I've relearned my body and now I know what I can do. Like, especially, I mean, I think for every human body, there is a how am I today? What's happening in my body today? But for people with autoimmune conditions, it's even more so like that.
Yes, and you can start your day feeling a certain way, and an hour later you might feel very different. So it's not, it's moment by moment. Yes, I absolutely thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah. Well, I really just wanted to bring attention to it. You said it. But I did want to say too, like so how long ago was it now? Like 10 years ago, I decided, well, first of all, I was in so much pain physically. I don't know how much of it had anything to do with MS. I have no idea. But I was in so much pain physically that I was like, I have got to start strength training. And I'd never strength trained. I was all about cardio and yoga. Like those were my go-tos. And I injured myself literally every time I got on the yoga mat. I injured myself doing yoga. That's just how good I am. And, every time I did any kind of cardio, I injured myself. I was constantly in pain, and I was like, "I have to start strength training." Like, I just felt compelled, and the stuff that I had to start with was so embarrassingly remedial, and I was just like, "Okay,
I'm with you.
okay." So I went very slow, and I finally just gave myself permission to go as slow as I needed to go. So the thing I wanna say is that if you're somebody who has strength trained, but you don't do cardio, you may be a person who needs to learn to love cardio. If you've been a cardio person, you may need to learn to love strength training, et cetera, et cetera. Like, there is something to be said for doing what you love, but there's also a lot to be said if there are imbalances in how your body feels to like turning your attention to something different that is going to support you. But really doing less, right? Doing less than you think you can or that you think you should when you're starting something new, I think is so important. And, even in that, even before I knew that I had MS, this was a long time before I knew I had MS, there was a grief associated with doing what I thought was, like, nothing. Like, I was like, "This is ridiculous. Like, why can't I do more? I should be able to do more." And there was a grief in that reality of what my body could and couldn't do, versus what it could do in the past. And, because we do tend to think of it like, "Oh, I will always be able to do this thing."
Yes.
That is not true for anyone. It's not true for anyone, but we do tend to think it. And so there is, I just wanna say, a grief and a lot of feeling involved with doing less, seeing what you can and can't do, but injuring yourself it's really worth it to slow down and do less and build up slowly, and it's such a gift that you give yourself and your body.
It is, and I wonder, I'm just anecdotally wondering if it's that type A personality that is like, "Yeah, I can do," you say, "Do this, I can do 10 more of those," and then getting injured. I do wanna speak about the grief. It's interesting as you were talking about watching the rock climbing tournament, because I feel like that was one thing that really brought me so much joy, but I can't imagine myself doing that again. Because from a hand and foot perspective, I mean, you need to have working hands and feet. Um, and so, like, I just felt that wave of it as we were coming into that call, which is, it's good to recognize it, right? Versus just sort of stuff it and go, oh, yeah, of course you'd be sad about missing out on that. And how else could you enjoy it? And the other thing I wanted to touch on was, different conditions may have different movement uh, requirements or recommendations, and so check with your healthcare provider about what they're suggesting for you. For example, in rheumatoid arthritis, it's try low impact. So they want you to be cycling for instead of running, right? Or swimming so that, so you're keeping the weight off the sore joints. I have various different things. I didn't really think I'd ever get back to yoga, but thankfully, my sister, who's an incredible yoga teacher, said, "Let's get you on the mat somehow." And we just started with just 3 or 4 poses. And now I do it 5 days a week. And so it's amazing where you just start, but it's really that, I do want to say self-compassion again, Nona. That compassionate presence, like loving, self-kind, common humanity, mindfulness in it, just presence to exercise. Because I don't know what it is that drives me, but I'm usually trying to do a little bit too much, like, "Oh, let me fit another thing in," and it does not serve.
Yeah, I mean, that it's and I think it's really so common in our culture. And when you say the different recommendations, I agree with that. You do need to find out what's recommended, but if you're not moving at all, any movement is preferable. And I would never like who do they even recommend high impact aerobics anymore? Like, I don't even think and I don't think anybody does. In reality, it's like, "No, that's not good for you." I mean, they've even got I think I've heard I think it was my daughter, told me that they now recommend walking over running, like, that walking is better for your body than running is. So, it's things change. So, really, what you'll do consistently is the right thing to do. And that's usually going to be the thing that you enjoy. One of the things that you just touched on in talking about your journey back to yoga with your sister is that, movement doesn't have to be standing poses. It doesn't have to be walking. It doesn't have to, like, if you are in a position where you are in a wheelchair or you are in a bed for this particular period of time, there is movement available to you. And again, there's a grief there, and it also may not feel like much or enough or whatever, but it's like life affirming. It's life affirming when you move your body because we really are made to move.
Yeah, and movement lubricates all those joints, right? So if you're not moving, it gets in the way. So anyway, but Nona, let's dive into the learnings that we wanted to share, the things that we share that we've learned in our journey.
Yes. So I don't know that we could say this enough. Like, I think we've said it a million times, maybe over the course of these last 25 minutes. Find something that lights you up and do a little bit less of it or less intensity of it than you think you should. Let's say that, right? Because we have like dance, yoga, walking in nature, all of those things. How can you move your body joyfully? And it may be that you aren't a regular exerciser. And so, I know for me, I had to look back into my history, like what do I really enjoy? What really lights me up and makes me feel good in my body? And then that decouples it from other expectations. We can separate it from being transactional when we're doing it because it feels good in our bodies.
Yes, absolutely. All right. The next one is about being aware of the different types of exercise. And, Nona already alluded to this. If you're already somebody who does a lot of aerobic but no strength, or you do a lot of strength and no aerobic, like how do you bring in and sort of almost like round out your exercise portfolio, if you want to say, like what else would be supportive and good for your body. And so once again, start with what feels good, because once you have a regular routine of what feels good, now you can layer on a little bit more, but go slow and really listen to your body. Don't just try and check it off and do it all at one go. Because then often we hurt ourselves and then we make a story that, well, I can't do this, but actually it was just maybe how we were titrating it up. So, being gentle with yourself, being honest with yourself, and listening to your body.
Yeah. And then finally, what support do you need to become a person that exercises? So, I am a really self-directed exerciser. And so I have a strength training app. I have like a streaming service that I use, and I exercise almost every day. So it's that important to me. I've made it a part of my life, and I don't need other people to, I mean, it's lovely if I can exercise with other people. I do strength train with my husband when he has the time, but mostly it's just me and whatever I'm doing. And if you are a self-directed person, fantastic. But if you aren't, then find the support you need, right? Like, do you meet someone at the gym? Do you meet someone for a walk? Do you train with someone? Do you get a personal trainer? Like, all of those things are valid. And if you are a person who needs that, get it. Get it. There are always people who are going to be willing to exercise with you. And Helen, you are a person who really likes to work out with other people. No, I love that. I mean, I love that we are so different in that way, because for some people, like, thinking about organizing their schedule around exercising with someone else would probably make them want to lay down and cry, y- myself included. But like for you, you love to work out with other people. And I love that about you. So talk a little bit about your exercise practice.
I am not as self-directed. So some of working out with other people is about accountability. If I'm
Mhm.
showing up at 8 a.m. every morning with my work colleague to do yoga on Zoom with her, I am absolutely on my mat for her. So it gets me on my mat.
Yeah.
Whereas otherwise I might be like, oh, a bit sore today. I think I'll just skip it. And then, after I've done yoga, I'm like, wow, I felt great.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. I would say I walk with friends in the neighborhood and I really, really enjoy that. But if they're not walking that day, I walk on my own. I think the
Mhm.
strength training has been a bit of a struggle for me because I've tried doing things on my own and got hurt. So now I'm, lucky enough to be working with a PT who's watching my moves. And I also have worked over time with an autoimmune coach who I highly recommend. She's amazing. And she's sort of given me some ideas of things to do around RA and, how to do things with my hands. And I have definite things that I work on in yoga that I use like jellies on my hands and stuff like that. And, I understand the privilege of having those healthcare practitioners who are working with me. So what I want to say, if that's not available to you, who are your friends and allies who may work out for you or say they need to get something done, like a writing project. So you meet together on Zoom maybe, and you do your exercises and they do the writing, whatever it is, like what's available to you that will actually have you honor a commitment to move your body in service of your health or in service of joy and fun.
Absolutely, right? Totally. And I don't know, the MS center I go to is in Denver, but I know that they have a lot of movement resources for people who go to the center, and I don't know how much of that is available in other communities, but it's also if you have an autoimmune condition and you are linked up with a center, they are gonna have resources for you too that may not cost extra money.
I was going to put a couple of resources from the Arthritis Foundation because there are some really great suggestions there on how to move that cover the span of what we've talked about today. So if you're an RA person like me, then you can go into the show notes and get those resources.
I'm unclear about this, but here's what I'm gonna do. I follow some people who do have like MS and neurological condition specific movement platforms where they have not only exercise, but they have also like educational stuff and trainings, a lot of vestibular training. All of them do that. But there are a couple that are popular. One of them is here in Denver. It's called the MS Gym, but it's online as well. And then there's also Gretchen Hawley, who is a PT who does MS specific movement. I am still unclear. Like to me, most of the stuff that they're doing is geared towards people who are already experiencing a fair amount of disability. I don't know if that's true. That's how it appears to me. So, like for somebody in my situation who's, you know, it's not it's not terrible. I'm still very mobile like on the disability scale. I'm at like a 0 1, like it's very low. It's really just recommended to do your own exercise but to do it consistently. And so, whatever you can do that is good for your body and is aligned with your joy is going to be great. It's going to be great. But we do have resources, at least in the MS and RA category. And perhaps you, as a listener, might have other things that you could recommend for other autoimmune conditions.
Yeah, we are all ears. We would love to hear from you in the comments.
Mhm.
So, and yes, from different perspectives, because we're talking about the perspectives that we've experienced with our conditions. So, as we wrap up today, we want to give a little wink to the next session where we're going to talk about breath and meditation and how they can help us manage our conditions and specifically in times pain. So we look forward to seeing you next time when we break into double digits on episode 10.
Oh my gosh, how exciting. All right. Well, Helen, it was lovely to converse with you today. And for those of you listening, thank you for joining us around the campfire. And we look forward to hearing from you.
Yeah, see you next time.
Did you enjoy this campfire conversation? Please rate our podcast wherever you're listening to light the way for others to find the Autoimmune Campfire. The information provided on the Autoimmune Campfire is for educational or informational purposes only. It is not intended nor implied as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always, always consult your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you might have regarding a medical condition or treatment plan. The Autoimmune Campfire does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, physicians, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned on this site or podcast. Recording and editing wizardry by Make Your Day Richer. Thanks for joining Helen and I around the campfire.